Serving your country can bring many sacrifices along with it. Long stretches away from home and family, dangerous situations, and being separated from the spiritual support you grew up with. Join us this evening as we talk with chaplains, the spiritual leaders for those who serve. Thanks for tuning in to Veterans Voices. I'm your host, Steven Burchik, and I'll be filling in for Nathan Johnson, our usual host who is away. Tonight we'll be talking with military chaplains. If you want to be part of the conversation, call us at 925-313-1170 or send us a message through Facebook at Veterans Voices 1 or email us at veteransvoices@contracostatv.org. I had a special experience with a chaplain myself. I took this picture when I served in Vietnam in 1968. We were in a small base camp out in the boonies, and then this chopper comes in and the chaplain jumps out, heads over, and sets up a short mass for those of us who were Catholic. After that service, he had a generic service, if you will, for the other members of our unit. We participated, and it was comforting because we had lost a couple guys in our unit, and we were still going out on patrols every day, and we never knew what was going to be coming or happening. So appreciate what chaplains do. Tonight's first guests are Chaplains Paul Sauer and Brian Seidel. Welcome, Chaplain. If each of you could briefly introduce yourself, your religious background, and then your military service, about a minute or so.
Chaplain Seidel, you want to go first as the senior?
Sure. So Chaplain Brian Seidel, I'm Colonel 06 here at Fort Hunter Liggett as the new command chaplain here. I started in the Army back in '83 as a cadet at West Point, became a military police officer. Had a big break in service where I did pastoral ministry, civilian side, and came back to the Army National Guard in 2008. And after 5 years, switched over to the Army Reserve, where I'm presently an AGR, Active Guard Reserve Chaplain. So full-time, just like Chaplain Sauer. I think that's a minute, or maybe I gave you an extra few seconds there, Paul.
Great, thanks, sir. So I'm Chaplain Paul Sauer. I am a somewhat late to life joiner of the military. I spent 20 years running a church and a K-12 school in the Bronx, New York. And in 2016, I joined as a U.S. Army Reserve chaplain via direct commission. Spent 4 years at the 99th Readiness Division and a year as a battalion chaplain with a theater fixed wing battalion before my current assignment out here at Parks Reserve Forces Training Area in California as AGR full-time Army Reserve chaplain.
Well, thank you both for giving us the background. Brian, you said something about military police and then becoming a chaplain. Wasn't it Paul who was a soldier and eventually became a disciple or apostle? Kind of.
Well, Saul, he arrested a lot of Christians and turned them over to the military authorities, and the authorities, I'm not sure about what he was outside of that.
Anyway, we appreciate what you're doing. I have a couple of just general questions, kind of educational for myself as well as the listeners. What service branches make up the Chaplain Corps?
Paul, you want to go ahead?
So we have chaplains that serve in all of the branches. I'm not aware if we have chaplains in the new Space Force yet, but generally you have Army chaplains who serve the Army, you have Air Force chaplains who serve the Air Force, and you have Navy chaplains who serve the Navy, the Marines, and are sometimes called into service for the Coast Guard when they're activated.
Okay, and I assume they'll also help out the Merchant Marine?
Indeed, when the Merchant Marines pressed into duty, as they occasionally are, the Navies are sort of the cover-all chaplains.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. What are the general requirements to become a chaplain?
So to be a chaplain, you have to have a Master's of Divinity. That's kind of the gold standard. You can have a degree over, I think it's 72 hours now. A lot of these things change a little bit, but you have to have a pastoral identity. So you have to have established yourself within your faith group and tradition as a leader, and to know who you are as a leader within that tradition. And that tradition then has to endorse you. So we have over 200 different faith groups, and they are the spectrum of Christianity, Muslim, Hindu, and Jewish, and Catholic, and we have Buddhists as well, and Islam, if I didn't mention that. So we have quite a number of endorsers, and they have to certify you in your religious experience and your religious qualifications. And the Army looks to the endorsers to do that. So if you have the degree, which obviously is predicated on a bachelor's degree as well, a master's degree, and you have that endorsement, and you have to be in good health, because you're going to be called, you serve with a unit in the Army, you go everywhere they go, you do everything they do, except you do it without a weapon. And so, you have to be in good health as well, and to show that maturity and that background where you have evidenced the high moral standard and the call to serve as a chaplain.
Thank you for that. What is a general ratio of one chaplain per 200,000 service people, or is there some kind of ratio? Well,
typically you have a chaplain. The lowest level is typically at the battalion level, which can range anywhere from 500 to 800 soldiers. So when I was a battalion chaplain, I served in an infantry battalion of approximately 800 soldiers, not counting family members. So it can be a pretty large group that you serve, and not everyone believes what you believe, and there's probably a much smaller segment who believe exactly what you believe, but you serve and, in a sense, shepherd and pastor that whole flock, that whole unit, regardless of what you believe. We serve them, that unit, as in many ways, which, as a soldier advocate, as obviously the religious, to help to meet all the religious needs, the various religious needs of the soldiers, and then in counseling, and also we serve the commanders as a staff officer to advise them with morale issues and the moral climate, and then religion, how it affects the unit and how it reflects the operational environment.
Paul, it sounds like the ratio is pretty big. It actually sounds like you're responsible for helping more people than many medium and small and even some large-sized churches.
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. But one of the things that I really enjoyed as a part of this chaplain experience is the immense collaboration that we as a chaplain corps share with one another. As Chaplain Seidel mentioned, we're running into soldiers and caring for soldiers that have such a diversity of religious experiences that are far beyond what we would experience on the civilian side. And so my journey in the chaplain corps has put me in touch with rabbis and imams and who are serving as chaplains. And the beauty is you can call them up and say, well, how do I take care of this Jewish soldier? He's requesting this special need, and my commander is not really sure what to do with it. And so our numbers are somewhat sparse when you look at the civilian ratio. But in terms of the collaborative group effort, I think that we certainly multiply our force in a pretty good way.
Kind of a general question. Given the differences between performing a formal religious service, on a base, and counseling servicemen, women, sailors, soldiers, etc., what's a rough ratio of one task versus another?
Well, my experience, most of what have done in a regular work day, work week, has been not religious services. It's been the counseling, it's been the family support. Even as a reservist, I would meet on off-duty time with spouse and soldier to try to help them, and it's just all the myriad of issues, from financial issues to family, children, and just everything, resilience, or just any issue. A soldier may come with anything, so you have to be ready, and nothing surprises you after a while.
Yeah, and I think the Army too is trying, at least on the Army side that we speak to, is trying to be a little more proactive about addressing these soldier needs. And so Chaplain Seidel mentioned we do a lot of counseling, but we're seeing ourselves do more and more proactive training as we try and help soldiers be a little more resilient, as we try and help families address some of the challenges that they face before they become crisis challenges that end up landing the soldier or their family in our office for an in-depth counseling when things go horribly wrong.
Following up on that, what would you say is the biggest challenge in getting service people to participate in either religious services or even to acknowledge that either of you might be a source of help or assistance in their lives?
I think the biggest problem today is that culturally we just do not have the appreciation for the spiritual components of life. And, Dr. Lisa Miller has gone around with the Spiritual Readiness Initiative in the Army with the Chief of Chaplains, Call and Blessing, to share how important it is. I was at a seminar with her, and she used the word amputation, and how when you disregard the religious aspect, the spiritual aspect of life, it's like amputating a piece of a person. And we see in other cultures where religion is so central. And I really think we have to get back to that place where we recognize just how important it is. It's so many of the the second, third, fourth order effects of decisions and things that happen, and the way you handle it in your life, and how this emotional, spiritual, physical being that we are is just so interconnected. So we could do better at that. And I think if it was more culturally acceptable and there was just more emphasis, and we placed a lot of emphasis in the Army on spiritual resilience and readiness, but we, as a culture, and even in the military, I think we could do more.
There's an old phrase, no atheists in foxholes. Do you see a difference in soldiers, sailors who are in active combat zones versus based here in the States? Either your own experience or others you work with.
I would say that stressors, whether it's combat or other, tend to reveal character more than they form character. And when people are placed in difficult situations, whether it's combat or life challenges, I think there is a tendency maybe to reflect more on spirituality or the place of one's existence within the world, which is really a spiritual question. But whether we see mass conversions or not in foxholes, I don't know that that's necessarily the case. But it does certainly open individuals to questioning about life and existence and the broader questions. And I think, again, that's one of the things that our diverse chaplain corps is really good at, is helping people find their way through those questions, however it is in the myriad ways that those get asked.
Well, thank you. Both of you, we do appreciate giving us some background on how people become chaplains and the challenges that each of you face in your daily tasks and jobs. When we come back, we're going to continue the conversation. Right now, we want to pay tribute to Father Vincent Capodano. On September 4th, 1967, Father Capodano lost his life in Vietnam, but his legacy lives on. He was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously and may be canonized as a saint. Let's hear a little about his actions on that day.
Pretty much the way it worked was in the small units is you walked around till somebody shot at you, and then you had a firefight, and however that ended up going, that's how it ended up going. Well, he was right along with us. First of all, he had a tremendous love of the Marines. He always wanted to be around the troops. He would, if he saw 2 or 3 Marines standing around, he'd come over and join them. He had a great instinct for seeing inside people. He was forever going from Marine to Marine to Marine. About maybe an hour into it, he got hit with a mortar, lost the fingers on his right hand and took damage all the way up. But he continued to, he didn't get any medical attention. He continued to go to wounded Marines, trying to assist them. At the same time, the NVA are setting up a 50 cal machine gun. And the Marines were yelling at him, don't go across that opening, don't go across. But he wanted to get to those Marines, and I think a corpsman. And he went across in between the machine gun and them, and he got stitched 27 times in the back, and he died. It affected everybody. You know, I know it affected me, because it wasn't just like losing another Marine. Potentially knowing a saint, you know, that's a wonderful thing. I'm more grateful for having known Father Capodano, the priest, in the environment that we lived with in Vietnam, and what he was able to do for all of us and myself on a daily basis.
We're talking with military chaplains. Want to be part of our conversation? Call us at 925-313-1170 or send us a message through Facebook at Veterans Voices 1 or email us at veteransvoices@contracostatv.org. Now I want to welcome to the show Chaplains Carl Rhodes and Karen Meeker.
Good evening, Steven. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good to see you. If each of you could give us a quick 1-minute introduction on your religious background and then your military career. Karen, why don't you go first?
Great, thanks. It is great to be here with you all. And Steven, thank you for your service, particularly in the Vietnam War. I'm pinch hitting this evening for General Waff, who sends regrets. He really wanted to be here tonight, but I'm thankful that I get to be here. Thanks to all our veterans out there who are listening. Thank you for your service. I came in the United States Army from Pennsylvania, discerned a call to serve in the uniform of our Army when I was growing up in Shikshini, Pennsylvania, and pursued that calling with my church, in the United Methodist Church, who endorses me today to be a chaplain. I went to Bucknell and Harvard for my education. I've served with the 82nd Airborne Division, the 101st, 2nd Infantry Division, and 1st Armored Division. Served with Special Operations, and recently was in Korea during the pandemic. And I'm back now in Washington for the 4th time. Maybe I'll get it right this time. And so that's a little synopsis of where I've been with the Army.
Well, thank you. So far, we've had 3 Army representatives. Finally, we're going to hear from the Navy. Go ahead.
Yes, indeed. It's good to be here, sir. Thank you for the kind invitation, the warm welcome, and what a great panel. My name's Carl Rhodes, Commander, United States Navy, endorsed by the Wesleyan Church. My grandfather is, interestingly enough, ma'am, was your same endorser back as a World War II chaplain. He was United Methodist, so neat connection there. Been 19 years active duty, 7 duty stations, 5 deployments, married with 4 children. Give a shout out to my wife, Amy, who without her support, I couldn't have gone and done some of the just phenomenal things that I've got to enjoy. I think the best part about being a naval chaplain is the diversity of experiences. As one of our earlier guests pointed out, we served not just the Blue Water Navy, but the Marines, the Coast Guard. I served with the Seabees. We shore installations, deployable units. I've served on the USS Theodore Roosevelt as the Air Wing chaplain. And I think that's what I've enjoyed most about it, is it's just so different, at least for me, from the parish ministry, where it isn't going to change a lot. But as a military chaplain, particularly in the United States Navy, I was.
Well, thank you very, very much for that introduction. Little background here. According to a 2021 Gallup poll, there's been a significant decline in membership in church, synagogue, or mosques, going from roughly 70% from the 1930s through the 1990s. It actually held pretty steady. However, since about 2000 to the present, it is now running at about 50% participation, a pretty significant reduction. Have you seen this trend reflected in the service people you work with or other chaplains, their experience in how it was, 30 years or more ago and now? Is your job harder or the same?
Stephen, I'll start. I think there's definitely been changes in our country as far as religious demographics, and those polls certainly show that. I think one of the big things is how people characterize their religious status. 25, 30 years ago, mainline denominations, people identified with those mainline denominations more broadly, but now today I think people tend to be more general in their affiliation. One of the things that the polls show is that there are nearly 30% of nuns, not Catholic nuns, but nuns, N-O-N-E-S. But some people, for some that say that maybe they fall in that category, doesn't mean that they don't practice their faith or have a faith or are spiritual, but maybe they're non-denominational or they're no preference. So I think things have changed. Attendances are down in the traditional services, but those are opportunities for us as chaplains to connect with our service members and family members. What do you think, Carl?
Sure. Yeah. Well said. I think the thing I enjoy most about, or another thing about being a chaplain is, my salary is not dependent upon my chapel attendance. So many other opportunities to serve and to meet people and to meet them where they're at. My father, he's a Vietnam era veteran. And, he admonished me when I was starting this journey. He said, don't just spend your time in the office. He said, go among the people. and just what wise words. And at least on the Navy model, we call it deck plate ministry, and that's really the way you do it. Is whether you're on a ship or you're at a shore installation or you're on deployment, don't spend the bulk of your time in the office. Many of us, tend to be introverts, bookish. Maybe you want to spend time studying theology, or we get stuck behind a computer. But the value is being among the people. So will you have a chapel service? Absolutely. And sometimes, Sunday doesn't always land on a Sunday, it's on a Tuesday, and you find yourself with an opportunity. But don't get discouraged when there's two or three people. Those two or three people needed to be there. But those others that you meet in the passageways and out on the deck plates, the family members, the civilian employees and things that are vital to our success. You'll find yourself rewarded with that type of ministry. So, like I said, it's more than just the chapel service on Sunday, and there's just such great need. And you can't walk, 20 yards without finding it often.
Yeah, and I would say too, that's one of the big things, we do as chaplains. We're always helping people, and we connect all the many agencies and nonprofits who are helping our service members and families too. There's hundreds and hundreds of helping agencies across Department of Defense. And, our chaplains' offices are a lot of times those places where, we're connecting people in need with the right agency. And there's so many nonprofits out there. I think there's like 45,000 nonprofits that help veterans and service members. And I just want to mention to our veterans out there, there's a new program called ETS, Veteran Sponsor, and it's signed an agreement with Department of Defense and the Veterans Affairs to help our veterans link up with those 45,000 nonprofits and kind of work through, what groups can help them with their needs.
The other day I was checking the Army website on chaplains, and there was a list of duties, and there were about 30 items listed, which kind of shocked me. I figured...
That's all? That's all?
One of the items that stood out was represent service people in disciplinary actions. Do either of you do that from time to time? I kind of thought there was the Adjutant General or the Legal Corps would be doing that.
Well, certainly they get their representation, that's due them. But I think I'm getting low battery all of a sudden. But, as chaplains, who goes to that person that's in need? And, when someone is under investigation or under charges, they often become very isolated. And, who's going to go and speak to that person in need again? Who is going to go into that cell, that place of loneliness where, the soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Coast Guard is be able to unburden their soul in a confidential setting. It's going to be the chaplain that's going to go in there and walk in that dark valley and take care of that service member.
Can I hear your comment on that as well?
Sure, absolutely. And I don't know what the other services call it. We call it captain's mast. And oftentimes the accused come in and their rights, and like I said, there's legal representation and things, and then you'll have the entire chain of command around the room, and oftentimes the chaplain is there as well. And so, as ma'am pointed out, the confidential communication is just absolutely critical, that we maintain that. But oftentimes, if the accused will relieve us of that confidential communication, that bond, then we're able to perhaps speak on their behalf and to give some background, some illuminating information, and such. And so it's not every unit that I've been in. That's some of it's just standard. that was my appointed place of duty. I was there every time, whatever the charge was. But then other units, not as much, but yeah, just those opportunities, as ma'am pointed out, just to be available, those times when no one's looking, and you're available. Like here, just this last week, got a call. The guy had to, from the payphone in the brig, called our office and said, "Man, I need a chaplain up here right away." And so we're able to have those opportunities to access that are just invaluable to their mental health, to their spiritual health, and it's just a real privilege.
Okay, so you've had a tough week. You're helping a number of other people. They're all coming to you with their problems. At the end of the week, where do you go to kind of help you refresh, recharge? Either of you.
We go to the source that gives us strength. I go to my Lord, and I'm sure my colleagues do the same. We go to our shepherd that cares for us and carries our burdens. And I think as colleagues too, we spend a lot of time in fellowship together. If you see a group of chaplains, we're usually, breaking bread together, and there's a lot of laughs. And, I know that fellowship really helps us, helps me. And we have a special relationship too with the other special branches. It's often the chaplains and the docs and the lawyers that are getting together and just processing things and sharing some laughs and sometimes some tears as well.
Well, thank you for sharing that and for enlightening us a little bit on today's service people and how they're coping with changes in society in general and the military as well. That's the end of this segment. I know it went pretty fast, but we've got another chance in a few minutes. When we return, we're going to conclude this conversation with the entire panel and answer all of the viewers' questions. First, we want to honor the military career of Senior Master Sergeant Bill Reed in this month's Shadow Box segment.
Tonight's Shadow Box belongs to Senior Master Sergeant Bill Reed. Born and raised in San Francisco, Bill Reed enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1982 as a light wheel vehicle mechanic. He later enlisted in the U.S. Air Force Reserves as an aerospace ground equipment technician and was activated in 1990 for Operation Desert Storm. In 1998, he deployed to Al Dhafra Air Base in support of Operation Southern Watch, and again deployed in 2009 in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. He retired from the Air Force in 2015 after 33 years. We honor his service.
We are talking with military chaplains. We welcome you to contact us with questions or comments. Call us at 925-313-1170 or send us a message through Facebook at Veterans Voices 1 or email us at veteransvoices@contracostatv.org. And now we're going to bring the entire group together. 1, 2, 3, 4. They all stayed. Okay, we're having a good night. This segment, we're going to kind of do what the newspapers used to call man on the street or woman on the street. And we're going to give you all the same question and ask you to kind of answer it. The question is, what was one of the most significant or challenging events of your career as a chaplain? Anyone's welcome to go first. Not Karen.
Well, I'll jump on that one. Thanks again for having us on. It's been some years ago. I was in Helmand Province, Afghanistan with 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, and one of our units had struck an IED, and we got a call at the main FOB where we're at the forward operating base, and they asked for a chaplain. And so I traveled about 2 hours via convoy to a small outlying operating base. It was about 2,200 at night, and a platoon of Marines had walked 2 hours in from the base that had been hit, and rolled out of the convoy. About 5 minutes later, we were headed outside the wire on foot, 2 more hours through cornfields and such. You know, you always wonder, you know, what will you say to people, you know, that have been through so much? And that was really what got to me. That experience was just being there, and that ministry of presence is what the Marines valued the most. And I don't recall that I did any sort of a special service or prayer. I don't even remember. I just remember being there and how much it seemed to mean to them that I was there. And just what a humbling experience to represent, you know, something greater, to represent faith, to represent, I don't know if it was in bravery, but someone that was there, that chose to be there. And it was just very humbling, and always just had a big impression on me, you know, not to worry about what you say, just be there for the people.
I'm sure they appreciated it. Thank you for sharing that. Can we get another volunteer?
Sure, we'll jump in. On Epiphany Day, January 6, 2020, I was working as a training and resource chaplain at the 99th Readiness Division. And the U.S. Army Reserves is responsible for providing chaplain care to the dignified Dover transfer mission. And so what happens is whenever there is a fatality au conis, the remains of the soldier or the airman or the Marine or the sailor are flown back into Dover Air Force Base, usually in the middle of the night. And the families of those military personnel are invited to come and witness the repatriation of the remains. And so on that particular day, there was an attack in Kenya that killed one of our young service members, Henry Mayfield Jr., a young kid from Chicago. And so we got the call to go down and to meet with the family. And so there's a whole team of people that work together to really try and make sure that the families are taken care of. And so from the minute they're on the ground in Dover, they stay at a home that's provided for them, and we as the chaplains stay with them. In addition, Henry Mayfield, there were 2 DoD civilian pilots who were killed as well. And so I spent most of the next 14 hours just being present with them. And one of the DoD pilots' wife was there with their 4-year-old little girl named Heaven. And I spent really a good part of that next time just playing with Heaven. To this day, I still keep in touch with Heaven's mom, Hope, and have journeyed with her through her grieving process, even down the road. But it's such an amazing privilege to be able to care for not just soldiers who give their lives in service to our country, but our civilians and our family members who also give so much for our country as well.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and I understand that may be one of the most difficult tasks, dealing with those who've lost their lives and their families. New volunteer.
I'll go ahead in the same kind of line as what Paul just mentioned. Death notification is one of those things that is very difficult. We, as chaplains, go along with the officer NCO who makes the notification. And in this case, our battalion was called upon to do it. The first sergeant from one of our companies, who was actually a friend of mine, lived in the community I lived in the Guard. He and I went together. It was a difficult journey. It was a very remote location. We weren't sure, just so many stressors. And finally, we were able to nail down the actual location and to know we were going up to the right house. And I say that there was in that particular situation, it was difficult because the NCO who has to make that notification, a lot of what we're doing is there to support that officer NCO. And he was just very, very stressed. And we were able to have a word of prayer together. We walked up there together. And I know in my own mind, I know he was, it's just such a devastating thing. What was going through my mind is as I was walking up, there was a light on in the house. And I'm thinking to myself, this person's life is going to change. It's never going to be the same. And, they're, in this case, the mother, her son had been killed in combat, and we're going to tell her that her son is dead, and she has no idea. It's not always that case. Sometimes family members will get some kind of a little advance notice or something. I've been on a few of those, but in this case, it was just completely unknown. And the first sergeant went up there, and together we made that notification. He actually spoke. I was there for moral support. And then we went in and spoke together with her and tried to console her. And it's just a devastating thing. And, having lost a close family member myself, being through that, it's just one of those burdens, like I know my mother has never been the same from the loss of my brother. And, I just continued to pray for her for a very long time. And she was not a person who had a strong faith background or really had any faith background at all. And that made it even more difficult because it's hard. There are those people who don't share your particular beliefs and perspectives, and you do your best to support them from where you're coming from and to try to help them where they're at. And just a very, very challenging thing to support the first sergeant and also to try to support that mother through something that is just, again, devastating and life-changing.
Thank you. Do appreciate that. And once again, that sounds like one of the most difficult part of your jobs. Karen, we're kind of saving the best for last, but can you give us your experience?
On a different note, a lighter note, perhaps, give an example, a day of a life or a season in the life of a chaplain. When I was in Korea, my second assignment, vision for a coffee house ministry that brought together soldiers and airmen that were on the camp that I was stationed at, officers, NCOs, and enlisted, and this team came together to worship, to have religious education, and to help others and to help the community. And this team formed just this tremendous bond over 18 months. And from that group, we had 2 lives that were literally saved, two soldiers that were going to take their life that came into the coffee house and were triaged and brought back to life. And then from there, we had 12 that entered full-time ministry from that coffee house ministry. And that particular ministry continued on for over 12 years until that camp was closed. So just the opportunity to bring together a faith community where people can belong, they can find their meaning and purpose in life, they can find support and strength. So one of the other aspects that we bring as chaplains is just building just strong community to bring out the best in people.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. We've got a question from a caller, and once again, a couple of you can take your turn answering this. Sharon from San Ramon asks, how do you best support soldiers who do not share your specific religious beliefs?
For me, I've got a Rolodex, or however you want to put it in our modern electronic age, of colleagues and friends along the way. So if I have a Jewish soldier, I call Chaplain Teitelbaum. If I have a Muslim soldier, I call Chaplain Shabazz. If I've got a Buddhist soldier, I call Chaplain Lee. If I've got a Mormon soldier, you know, on and on down the list we go. Because really the best people who know how to take care of their soldiers are the people from that religious tradition. And so as chaplains, we're trained on how to be sensitive. But I think one of the jobs that we do is we're also resourcing agents to connect people to their own faith traditions and really help them to be the best Muslims and Jews and Christians and whatever their faith tradition is that they can possibly be.
Somebody else with a different experience?
Well, there's lots of ways to support a soldier that may not be a direct, like a religious service. So I've offered counseling with soldiers who are Wiccan and atheist. And, you know, I always offer them a word of prayer at the end. And sometimes they want me to pray with them and sometimes they don't. But you can be there to be a listener and to be a support and to be a soldier advocate in whatever the particular situation. So there's lots of ways that you still support soldiers and their families, even if they don't share your religious beliefs.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Okay, another question just relating in general to becoming a chaplain. Look, you know, today's experience versus 20, 30 years ago, once again, based on your conversations with other chaplains, is it harder or easier to recruit chaplains these days? Is there a shortage of people applying, or you got people banging on the church doors?
The Army is hiring. Give us a call. Go Army chaplain. It's harder to get some different denominations and religious groups to apply for the military chaplaincy. So diversity can be a challenge, but we're doing pretty good overall. But there's certainly room for more religious ministry professionals across the United States to come and serve in the uniform of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. Or I should say Army, Navy, and Air Force.
What about the Navy there? Is your branch having difficulty, or are you meeting the quotas?
No, absolutely. There is, you know, we're probably, I don't know, from when I came in, probably 100 fewer chaplains than what, you know, I think we're around 850 right now. And especially for Catholic priests, I talked to a priest here a year or two ago, and he said, you know, the average age of a priest is in the Navy is like 55. We're just really, really having a hard time, you know, getting, as Ma'am pointed out, you know, some particular denominations just, and many of them are struggling in the civilian world. So it's hard to get a bishop or a superintendent to release a pastor, a priest, to go and say, why would you want to do that? Because we've got all these parishes here without pastors. Why would we want to release one to go to the military? And so it can be a challenge. The academic standards too are extremely high, which poses another issue for many people.
Well, I guess you want quality people in that position. We need to wrap this up. I want to thank each of you for what you've contributed tonight. This is actually one of the most flawless shows we've had in terms of technical problems. And we have to thank Karen, because just before the camera started rolling, she made a special prayer. And we want to thank her for doing that and helping communicate the word of God above to help all our listeners and soldiers and airmen. So thank you very much for participating tonight. This concludes our discussion.
Thank you very much.
A little later in the show, we'll have new resources for veterans. Now it's time to hear a veteran's voice. This month, Noga Kessler talks with Air Force veteran Noel Lepana.
Welcome to A Veteran's Voice. I am Noga Kessler, Veterans Voices correspondent, and today we have with us retired Air Force officer Dr. Noel Lepana. During his 20-year military career, Dr. Lepana served in numerous military units, both active duty and National Guard. His service includes volunteering to serve as a counter-IED officer for Army Airborne Infantry units, conducting counterinsurgency operations in southern Afghanistan from 2007 to 2008. Dr. Lepana earned his Bachelor's of Science and commission from the U.S. Air Force Academy, was medically retired from the military as a lieutenant colonel in 2016, and received his Doctor of Social Work from the University of Southern California in 2018. Dr. Lepana is a recipient of a Bronze Star from the Army and a Combat Action Medal from the Air Force. Welcome, Dr. Lepana.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't we start with what brought you to the military? What brought you to join the military?
I come from a family of immigrants. My father immigrated here from the Philippines, and my mom is literally a coal miner's daughter, so I'm probably the only Filipino Polak you're going to meet today. And they both instilled in my siblings a strong sense of community service and service to the nation.
So, how did you find yourself to the Air Force?
Personal grudge. It took me 3 times to get into the Air Force Academy. I was qualified and nominated each year. I interned at my congressman's office one of the last years that I applied, and they knew I would get that the Air Force Academy, since I was on a scholarship to New Mexico Military Institute, was holding an appointment for me at Air Force, so they gave me the primary nomination to West Point, and they ranked me second on purpose for the Air Force Academy, so I had my choice. So yeah, that's how I ended up in the Air Force.
Maybe you could share a little bit about your experience in the military. I know it was quite extensive. It's 20 years, so it's a lot.
Yeah.
I know.
In a way, you feel selfish because you take away these incredible relationships. The people, first and foremost, are still a huge part of my life and the biggest asset that this nation has, and to serve alongside other men and women who doesn't come from these really disparate backgrounds, and seeing how talented and motivated they are to contribute, I think is the biggest thing for me.
We always talk about those core values we develop in the military through our training and the code of conduct and those things like that. What are some of the things that stand out for you that really helped you in the transition?
Several. Discipline, obviously. I have a lot of grit, but that's a double-edged sword, right? So one of my mentors and colleagues, Dr. Joy Verplank, says, grit is what allows you to finish the race, but it doesn't get you ready for the next race. So you can get you to the finish line, but so you have to go to some of these other, tools and experiences that you kind of were imbued in you in the military, like that sense of purpose and mission. And I think that's where transition was difficult for me, and I think it is for a lot of other veterans, and finding that new identity. Because during my work study and doctoral work, learned from my colleagues and the circles that I was in the veteran community, that the veteran transition process for individuals who are still too tightly tied to that military identity have a more difficult time going into the civilian world. And not that you have to completely shed that identity or lose those, like to your point, core values and attributes that you've gained in the military, but they just have to be transformed and kind of recalibrated a bit. So I think I certainly struggled with that identity, like what's next for me, how what is that purpose or that mission. Once you find that that why, then everything else falls in place, and you can go at it in a very systematic way, just like you achieve things in the military. And then that sense of team, that you've transitioned from one team in the military to achieve objectives or goals or whatever in the military, to now doing one personally. And it's like, how do you structure that family network, community network, professional and social network around you to help achieve that? Because none of the things, that stuff you read before on the teleprompter is done by me alone, right? So I'm just happen to be like a small, look inside of what that concerted effort, produces.
You're a leader. It's a lot of what what I shared in the beginning indicates a leader.
Rabble rousers. And
But you continue to lead, and there's so much that you do to help others from your experiences.
The David J. Dracula Chart Foundation, which was named after my battle buddy. Got his name tattooed on my arm here, along with several others. David was an artist. I'm going to take a minute to talk and brag about him, because people listening should know, about him. And he was just very emblematic of the type of soldier, the type of person that we want representing us overseas in those conflicts. And we unfortunately lost him. We offer art programming initially set out for the veteran and the military communities and connected families, and now have looked at the broader service that we can provide and legacy that we want to move forward, using art as a healing tool for community writ large. That's an aspect of leadership I'm particularly proud of and very privileged to be a part of. I think that Western society and medicine is very symptom reduction approach. We are averse to pain and suffering and grief and loss. We come from, I'll turn the thing again. The traditional, idea is like, okay, you came from this team-oriented where you do everything in groups and teams in the military, and then in this transition, we expect you to go out on your own, navigate the VA, all these veteran service organizations and resources, and then when you do find the gold standard for mental health, it's all one-on-one. And that's like, it just is. So, but the traditional ancient warrior ritual is through, like, if you look at the Greek method, is through play and art and experiencing that. In Native American cultures, it's the talking circles and communalizing that grief and experience. So I think that is something that we need to get back to.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Lepana.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed our conversation with military chaplains tonight. We leave you with some resources for veterans. The Military Chaplains Association is dedicated to the advocacy and professional excellence of our military and government agency chaplains. Find them at mca-usa.org. Veterans can seek hot rod therapy. Operation Combat Bike Saver helps veterans heal by providing the parts and instruction for veterans to build their own motorcycle free of charge. Learn more at combatbikesaver.org. This year, the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors Veterans Day ceremony will be honoring the 75th anniversary of the County Veterans Service Office. The ceremony will be on Tuesday, November 8th at 11 a.m. at 1025 Escobar Street in Martinez. There will be a 3-day military museum at the Veterans Memorial Building at 400 Harts Avenue in Danville on November 11th, 12th, and 13th. Veterans Voices is brought to you in part by contributions from the Diablo Valley Veterans Foundation, dedicated to helping veterans near you. The American Legion Post 246, honoring the tradition of the American Legion in Danville. If you would like to help sponsor Veterans Voices, you can donate to Veterans Voices care of Diablo Valley Veterans Foundation. Get in touch with them at diabloveterans.org. To rewatch tonight's episode, check back on our homepage later this week or check your cable provider's schedule for rebroadcast times. You can also rewatch this episode and many others on our YouTube channel, Veterans Voices of Contra Costa, so be sure to subscribe. Our next show will air on Monday, November 14th at 7 p.m. We will be talking with women in service. You won't want to miss it. To all of our veterans and their families, thank you for serving. To all of you who tuned in tonight, thanks for watching and have a great evening.